So let's move on to you to the action in Portland. So there was a WDI Abolition of Gender tour, I think, that had an action in Portland. Could you tell us about it and tell us what happened? I guess quite a few people watching and women here will know that there were activists who were violent against women demonstrating in favour of our sex-based rights. And so we were very concerned about you, but really pleased everybody came out of it all right in the end. But would you tell us about that and what happened?
Women's Declaration International USA strongly condemns the violent attacks on us that took place near the Hollywood branch of the Multnomah County Library on Sunday, November 19th. In the face of this violent, woman-hating terrorism, we were proud to stand with women and girls as a sex class, spanning all ages, races, backgrounds, sexual orientations, and circumstances. We also condemn the Portland Police Bureau, which flatly ignored several calls made to 911 while women were being punched, kicked, and pepper sprayed. Portland police knew of the threat in advance. The library had been vandalized. Our tires were slashed. There had already been security breaches at the library that morning. The cops had driven by and seen the crowd and chose not to disperse it. This was a case of the Portland police knowingly and deliberately abandoning us to a mob. This statement is intended to provide a timeline of the events and our understanding of what happened. Our event was titled Protecting Women and Children, and we had booked a room at the Hollywood Library weeks in advance, as any member of the public can do. Our intention was to give talks about how to protect women and children from the threats we face. We invited women to attend. We had also booked an Airbnb for the nights of Friday through Sunday. We planned a series of training sessions in the tactic of nonviolent direct action beginning Friday evening and going through Sunday morning. Nonviolent direct action is a very specific tactic for political movements. It confronts power directly and nonviolently. In any nonviolent direct action movement, the violence of those in power already exists. Nonviolent direct actionists do not bring the violence because it's already there. The purpose of nonviolent direct action is to make existing violence visible to the public. In the weeks leading up to the attacks, numerous online threats were made, mostly involving the suggestion that pies or other food would be thrown at the speakers. Multnomah County Security discussed these threats with WDI USA volunteers and made plans to minimize the risks. Then, the day before the event, Multnomah County Security contacted the organizers to report a threat of gun violence. A concerned third party had informed them that a person planning to attend had stated, quote, "I am going to attend the event and bringing my gun, and if anyone messes with me, I will use it." The police were notified and a decision was made to move forward with the event with an increased police presence near the library. The situation escalated when, the night before the event, vandals arrived at the house where the organizers and several participants were sleeping and slashed the tires of all the vehicles in the carport. At that point, we were on notice that our location had been leaked to those who mean us harm, but we did not know by whom. A WDI USA volunteer called 911 to report the vandalism, but the Portland 911 dispatcher sent her to an automated non-emergency system, which then dropped. She called 911 again, and again, the Portland 911 dispatcher sent her to the same automated non-emergency system, which again dropped. At that point, there was little recourse other than to proceed as planned. And then there's a video of myself and Leah Keith explaining what was going on. Also overnight, the library was vandalized. The county security representative contacted us to tell us that the glass door had been shattered and the exterior of the library building was covered in graffiti. They did not tell us what the graffiti said. As a result, the library decided to close the public areas for the day, but they wanted to allow our event to continue in the room we had reserved. The library's normal opening time is 10 a.m. Pacific time. It did not open on that day because of the vandalism, but by that time, the mob had already begun forming. A woman reached out to WDI USA to tell us that she was in her car near the library entrance and that several parents, mothers in particular, and their children were there to enjoy the library and seemed frustrated that they couldn't because of the mob that had formed. The scheduled time of the event was 12 p.m., and county security asked us to hold off on coming until they would be able to secure the entrance. However, they eventually reported to us that the mob was circling the building and there was no way they would be able to secure our entrance to the building at all. When told to do so by county security, we set off from the Airbnb in 2 moving vans, half the participants in one, half in the other. We could see along the way that we were being surveyed. As we neared the library, county security asked us to stop, which we did. We waited while the head of county security and the library president, we later learned that president may not be that particular official's title, approached the first van and asked to enter it. We admitted them, and the women in the second van joined those of us in the first. At that point, all WDI USA participants were in one van with the head of county security and the library president when we were approximately 2 blocks from the library. They informed us that Antifa thugs had surrounded the library and menaced the employees. They also told us that patrons were at a coffee shop next to the library and that there was an elderly living facility above the library. They told us flatly that they were gravely concerned for the safety of library staff, event attendees, nearby patrons of the coffee shop, and the elderly people living upstairs. The head of the library stated that she had the phone number. I'm sorry, this is the head of county security, stated that she had the phone number of a Portland Police Bureau sergeant on speed dial, and that she was happy to call him the instant a crime was committed. They asked us to consider canceling our event. Several of us, I'm going to skip ahead because this is getting long. We had seconds to make our decision. One of the main organizers said that we were determined to continue with the event. Another of the organizers suggested that in order to avoid any violence being visited on library staff, audience members, nearby coffee shop patrons, and/or elderly residents of the space above the library, we continue the event, but that we do it on the sidewalk where we were. The last thing we wanted to do was put innocent people, including children and the elderly, in danger. We asked the head of county security to clarify that Portland police officers were in the area and that as soon as there was any sign of a crime being committed, she would call them. She assured us that she would be nearby and would not hesitate to call the police at the start of any criminal activity. We need to be very clear about this. We were a small group of women who had booked a space in a public library to talk about protecting women and children. We had done nothing wrong, and we did not intend to do anything wrong. We live in a society in which women ought to be able to speak at a public library about protecting women and children, but can't do so without Antifa thugs putting women, children, and elderly people at risk of violence. We exited the van and walked with our banner reading "Woman equals adult human female" to the nearest intersection just a few blocks from the library. We did this having been assured by the head of county security that the police would be nearby and that she would call them at the first sign of criminal activity. Our planned speeches covered many of the current harms women and children face, from prison rape to addictive and destructive online content. The women never got to give their speeches, and the police never came. I gave an introduction, and halfway through the very first speech, the women were noticed by the library mob, which advanced on them. The mob began screaming, chanting, and throwing cans filled with liquid at the speaking women. Cans landed on the ground, exploding with carbonated liquid. They landed on the bodies of the women standing there. Soon, the mob rushed the women and sprayed copious amounts of blinding, burning chemicals in their faces. The first woman hit was me, but I wasn't badly injured by it. The pain subsided fairly quickly. Other women were injured much more severely. The mob sprayed poisonous chemicals directly in women's eyes. The women were blinded and in excruciating pain. Several women called 911 immediately. 911 dispatchers could hear women screaming and Antifa mob members yelling at the women to get the F out of here. While the women were reporting these crimes against them, Antifa mob members stole their phones out of their hands, sometimes throwing phones to the ground and smashing them. They also stole 2 out of 3 body cameras that women were wearing. They punched several women who fell to the ground. While the women were on the ground, writhing in pain, Antifa mob members repeatedly kicked their bodies and heads. They attacked an old woman passerby, shoving her to the ground. WDI USA volunteers quickly helped the woman to safety at the home of a neighbor who had come outside to view the commotion. A local man tried to intervene to stop the violence, but the crowd continued to beat the women and threatened him. As far as the organizers know, the police never made it to the corner, just a few blocks away from the library, where they had claimed to have increased patrols. Throughout the entire ordeal, not a single one of the women participating in our event broke our commitment to nonviolence even once. Eventually, our group made their way to a Whole Foods nearby, I'm skipping ahead. The security guards were very happy in the Whole Foods. We called the vans, exited Whole Foods, piled in, and left to return to the house. When we got to the house, we faced another conundrum. What to do now? We knew that Antifa knew the location of the house. We had reason to believe that if they knew the location of the house, they might also know the door code to enter it. We had no faith that Portland police would do a single thing to protect us from threat, theft, assault, arson, rape, and/or murder. 4 of the women who were the most injured went to the emergency room to have their wounds treated. We called 911 anyway. They eventually showed up. I'm skipping ahead. They took our statements, etc. At this point, our options seemed simple. 1, rely on Portland police to protect us. 2, abandon the Airbnb to Antifa vandals, disperse and stay in private hotel rooms. Or 3, wait it out and simply hope that Antifa would not assault, rape, and/or kill us. None of those options seemed viable. We were simply not willing to put women's lives at risk by asking women to stay at a house whose location was known to Antifa thugs who hate us, likely without any police protection. We also did not relish the idea of abandoning the house to the thugs because the homeowner had done nothing to deserve to have her or his house vandalized. We also didn't like the idea of dispersing. At that point, what we wanted was continued sisterhood and solidarity. Then we had another idea: hire a private security detail. Private security was there within minutes. They were armed, polite, and extremely professional. Once security arrived, we were able to relax somewhat. We were able to eat dinner, talk, debrief, and even laugh a little. One woman had brought her guitar, and she entertained us with her beautiful singing. And I think I'll just end there because I know we're running out of time.
So, thank you so much for telling us about that, Cara. It sounds really quite terrifying. And it sort of indicates to me that it's really important, if women are going to do this sort of thing, to be trained and know what they're doing. It's quite a skilled thing, to be quite clear about sort of choices, and then have resources and capacity. For instance, when you decided you had to get the security in, you like to be able to make that decision for safety. What next? What do you think is you're going to do? Is are you going to carry on the gender abolition tour, or has it made you worried that you can't carry on?
We don't have any more events planned for 2023, but we absolutely are going to keep on. We have no intention of stopping. And I want to clarify a few things because some questions have come up specifically on Twitter. And I haven't been watching the chat, so I don't know what the chat's about. But I want to just be very clear that, yes, you're right, Joe. Training is essential. And we spend a lot of time getting very expertly trained in this tactic. It's a very specific political tactic for political movements that have no power, no public face, and almost no money, which is us. And during the training, it is made very clear to participants that any woman is totally free to walk away at any time. I see there's conversation about Kelly J in the chat. I don't know what that refers to, but I do know that Kelly J made the decision not to go forward with her New Zealand Let Women Speak event because she was concerned for her life. I have nothing but complete respect for Kelly J and all that she does. And if any woman says, this isn't for me, I'm not willing to put my body on the line, I have children I'm concerned about, I'm not willing to risk my job, total respect. Every woman is completely welcome to attend the training, be trained in the tactic, and then decide she doesn't want to participate. Any woman who says, no, I can't participate, will be totally respected. And I will also say there are roles for women who want to be involved but don't want to participate. For example, there were several women at the house with us who did grocery runs. They ran out to get food when we needed it. They ran out to get Band-Aids if we needed it. They were there to support our work, even though they themselves did not feel comfortable participating, which is great. If there are women who want to support the work, who don't feel comfortable participating in themselves, that is always very well appreciated. And if women want to stay away completely, that's fine too. We're not asking anyone to do this work. We're deeply grateful for any women who want to, but we're not asking anyone to do this work. It's just not for everyone, and that's completely fine.
How much publicity have you got, or have you had a lot of sort of feedback from people who've heard about what happened?
You know, one of the problems is there wasn't media there. So one of the goals is to make the violence visible. Again, the violence is there. We're not bringing it. We are making it visible to the public. And so our plan, because we didn't think there would be media, our plan was to use our phones to take our own footage and immediately send it to our social media coordinator, who would have gotten it on Twitter. That worked to some extent. However, when they started stealing our phones and smashing them on the ground, that was not a viable option. And those of us who maintained our phones didn't want to lose them. And I'm glad that we did that. So what we did was that the minute we got back to the house, I did interviews of some of the women who were on the street and who had been pepper sprayed. And we immediately got those on Twitter. And it's gotten quite a bit of attention. We've gotten a lot of sympathetic email messages from women all over the world who are watching. So even though it wasn't ideal in the sense of making the violence visible to mainstream society, it has gotten out there and it has gotten a lot of attention. And I'm grateful to all the women who have reached out.
Okay, and then there's another question. What steps will be taken to vet women to prevent and reduce the infiltration by women who are working for men in the trans lobby? I guess infiltration into our organizations. And
I hesitate to use the word infiltration because we're an entirely above board organization. What we're doing is completely legal and very specifically related to Articles 4 and 5 of the Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights, which refer to the right of women to freedom of opinion, expression, and assembly. And so what we're doing is completely lawful. We should be able to meet at a library and we should be able to plan our event. And so we did vet. And the reality is that someone who is very tricky can always get past the vetting protocols. But we are going to be looking at that. We have a meeting later today to talk specifically about how we can do a better job of vetting in the future to prevent leaking of private information. And I guess I also just want to say, this is on them, right? These are people who are willing to join a meeting, to spend time, to leak information, to get the physical address of a group of women who are meeting in peace and just eating and drinking and training and having a good time. This is all on them.